So for those of you who don't know, the first thing I have to do is read a script. So here we go. I have it right here. So if you see me looking down, that's what I'm doing. So good morning. I am Laura Shaughnessy, and I serve as chair of the Professional Counselor Advisory Committee for the Kansas Behavioral Sciences Regulatory Board. It's always a mouthful. I ask the members of the advisory committee to respond to a roll call to signify their presence at this open meeting that is being conducted remotely by conference call and other electronic medium. Leslie Suister. Oh, she's muted. Oh, can we hear you, Leslie?
Oh, sorry, I hit the wrong button. I'm here.
Great, thank you.
Monday morning.
Jessica Allison.
Here.
Good morning and welcome.
Good morning, thank you.
Harriet Bachner.
I'm here.
Right, welcome. Michelle Fairbank.
Here.
Welcome. Bob Kircher.
Here.
Welcome. Kenton Olaf is not here, is that correct?
That's correct.
And Andrew Secor is not here. And then Edel Torres Rivera.
Is a deal, but here.
Thank you and welcome. Can you please pronounce your name again? It's so important to get it right.
It's just like, let's make a deal. A deal.
Adil, got it. Okay, thank you, Adil. Welcome. I note the following members are also, or board members and staff are also present. David Fye, Leslie Allen, and Ashley Van Buskirk. Next, David Fye will read a message concerning this meeting being held remotely.
This is David Fye, Executive Director for the Behavioral Sciences Regulatory Board. Public comment allows the public to address the advisory committee about its concerns, but the Kansas Open Meeting Act, or KOMA, does not require the advisory committee to provide public comment or answer questions from individuals, but individuals requesting to provide public comment could contact the executive director prior to the meeting by sending an email to david.fye@ks.gov. There will be no public comment at the meeting to allow the meeting sufficient time to complete the items on the agenda, and no individuals had requested public comment for this meeting as well. Because we're conducting this public meeting remotely by conference call and other teleconference ability, I state for the record the following information. Public access to the meeting is being conducted by a medium of interactive communication that allows members of the public without cost to attend the meeting through the use of the conference call and on the board's YouTube channel. While the meeting is conducted remotely, the requirements of the KOMA are not suspended, so we'll be conducting this meeting pursuant to KOMA. On October 12th, 2021, we sent notice of the advisory committee meeting to all individuals who had requested notice of the meeting. The notice was also posted on the board's website, ksbsrb.ks.gov, and you may obtain a copy of the notice at that website. An agenda and other meeting materials were posted on the board's website, and you may request a copy of the agenda by sending an email to david.fye@ks.gov with the subject line request for the agenda, and it will be sent to you. The notice contains information for the conference call and the YouTube channel that allows the public to attend the meeting free of charge. The notice also states that if there are any technical issues during the meeting, you may call the board's office at 785-296-3240, or currently we would ask that you send an email to bsrb@ks.gov. A recording of the meeting will be available on the BSRB YouTube channel following the conclusion of the meeting by using the link to the meeting on the agenda. And we do have the conference call that is in use. So if there's any individuals on the conference call, go ahead and identify yourself now. Okay, I don't think there's any individuals on the conference call, but if I hear any beeps throughout the meeting, Laura, I will go ahead and let you know.
Thank you, David. The meeting is now called to order and the advisory committee will begin its discussion of the first item on its agenda, which is today the adoption of the agenda, the approval of the agenda. So remind me, do I need a motion to approve that?
No, it's just an opportunity if anyone wants to add any items to the agenda. If there's no changes, it's considered adopted by consensus. So you could do a vote or you could do consensus either way.
Does anybody have any questions or items they would like to add to the agenda today? Okay, I see a lot of nodding no. So let's continue on. So the first thing we would like to do is welcome our new advisory committee members. I'm so excited to welcome you and to hear from you. We'd like to know anything personally or professionally you'd like to share. You will find, I think, this is a rewarding committee to be a part of. I've only been on this committee for 15 months, and I can tell you that I've learned a tremendous amount. I did some simple math for the board member or the committee members that were rolling off, they had 28 years of total combined service on this committee. A lot of knowledge and experience is leaving, and also making room for new voices and new ideas. So I first want to welcome all of you. And again, take this opportunity, please, to let us get to know you a little better. Does anybody want to go first? There are 4 of you.
I can go first, I guess.
Great, thank you.
Sure. My name is Jessica Allison, and I'm down in the southeast corner of Fort Scott. I've been licensed about 10 years now, but have been in the field a lot longer than that. I am an empty nester. My kids are out of the home. So my husband and I are trying to find different things to do to keep ourselves busy. And by doing that, we are both veterans, and also our son is serving right now. So our focus right now is veterans services, what's lacking, what we can do to make that better. And by doing that, I am the local American Legion Post Commander. So that takes up some of my time. But 2 of my things that are very important to me, besides my family, obviously, is veteran services and mental health. And obviously, those go together. And living and serving in a rural area, it's a lot of stuff lacking. So I'd like to see that change. Other than that, that's all I got.
Great, thank you. Welcome.
Thanks.
Who would like to go next?
I can go.
Okay, Michelle.
My name is Michelle Fairbank. I live in Hayes, Kansas, have lived here all my adult life, came here to college and stayed. My husband and I will celebrate our 45th wedding anniversary next year in August. And we have 4 children, 5 grandchildren. So a lot of my downtime is spent with family. I have a private practice here in town with a couple of other therapists. We have formed a private practice where we're each individually in our own business, but we share some staff and of course offices. And we work really close with Fort Hays State with the interns. We offer internships for both counselors, people in the master's counseling department, and also the master's social work department, because one of my coworkers is a social worker. I teach either ethics or marriage and family for Fort Hays as an adjunct professor. I received my degree in 2013, but I worked in private education for 20 years before that, and where I ran a boarding school for, it ended up being almost exclusively an international boarding school by the time I got in there, and that was my job, was to clean it up, because it was supposed to be an academic thing and not something that was for kids who were just changing geography and having the same issues every place they went. And it was difficult, but it was a very challenging and rewarding. So I got to travel all over for 20 years to meet the parents that were trusting me with their children. And then I would hire the staff and we would take care of them as they pursued high school education. I have worked for the Department of Corrections for a couple of years. Right after I finished my degree, I worked at the Larned Correctional Mental Health Facility. And I've worked for a chemical dependency agency, Smoky Hill Foundation, here in Hayes for a little bit. But most of my time as a licensed therapist has been with in private practice. And let's see, one other thing that there's a couple things I'm passionate about, a dog rescue. And I have 2 rescues right now. And then also my husband and I both enjoy riding our motorcycles we call it wind therapy.
Awesome. What a great idea, wind therapy. Thank you so much.
I'll go next. I'm Harriet Bachner. I am a retired professor from Pittsburgh State University. And I've been living here in Pittsburgh, Kansas for about almost 16 years. Ironically, I grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So my family teases me that I got confused on the way back up to the Northeast. But prior to coming to Pittsburgh and PSU, I lived in Tahlequah, Oklahoma for 4 years and taught at Northeastern State University in Tahlequah, Oklahoma. And then prior to that, I lived in the Dallas area, Texas, had a private counseling practice there for 20 years. In addition, I also worked at a residential treatment facility for emotionally disturbed teenagers. And then before that, I worked at Terrell State Hospital, which is a state psychiatric facility that served the East Texas area and also the Dallas County area. My main area of focus is family therapy. And even though I'm retired right now, I'm going to be teaching a family therapy course in the spring semester at PSU, mainly because they needed a family therapist to teach that class. So it is a course that I've previously taught for 20 years. I guess my current activities have been involved in social justice issues, some political issues, and also I've done some consulting with a couple organizations in Southeast Kansas area.
Terrific.
I have one daughter. She is a researcher at the University of Vienna, and so she lives in Vienna, Austria. And unfortunately, because of the pandemic and pretty serious lockdowns that Austria does, I had to cancel a trip over this current holiday season. And I guess I've only been able to see my daughter for about 5 days over the past 2 years, because it seems like whenever we have planned a trip, the pandemic has interfered with that. So that's been very sad for me and for her. Fortunately, we Skype, so that helps. My partner, Jim, has one daughter who is ICU RN in Omaha, and her husband is a pulmonologist. And so all they've been dealing with is COVID patients, and they both are exhausted and emotionally wrought, and they're tired of watching people die. And so Jim and I try to provide listening ear and a source of place where they can just kind of vent with us. So anyway, I'm excited about being on this advisory committee. I feel like I have a lot of private practice and academic experience, and I'm looking forward to being able to help in whatever way I can on this committee.
Thank you. Welcome. So Adil, would you like to go next?
Yes. My name is Adil Torres Rivera, and I was kind of tracking notes. I've been a counselor educator for 35 years. 12 of them I spent as a behavioral science specialist in the United States Army, which I got out. I got my bachelor, my master, my first 3 courses of the PhD as a staff sergeant, so I was not an officer. Anybody who's in the military knows it's a little different, you know. So when people call me sir, I used to work for my living when I was in the Army. So I also am a full-time professor in Wichita State in a counseling program, but I'm also the director of Latino Studies that brought me here to kind of start a new wave of Latinos in the state, which got 17% of the Latinos of the population of Kansas is Latino. But yet we have only 4 or 5% of counselors and professors who are Latino, which I found that very interesting in terms of the disparity. So they brought me into trying to change that. I've been in the politics of counseling for a long time and a member of an ACA for 35 years plus. I'm also a member of the AMC, the Association of Multicultural Counseling and Development, which is my passion. I'm also a founder member of Council for Social Justice, and also my first association for the specialist for group work. What else? I mean, I look at in terms of the whole idea of how counseling work, and I'm looking in terms of diversity, but diversity in terms of gender, race, and ethnicity. When we talk about diversity, we water down the whole idea of what that means in terms of those differences, and we kind of walk backwards. And so I'm very passionate on the idea that we need to look forward and continue to assess and to look at the pieces that they have to do with that disparity in terms of gender, race, and ethnicity before we jump in the bandwagon that we are different. So anyhow, I'm very passionate. I speak with an accent, even though I cannot hear it, because I was born and raised in Puerto Rico. So my first language is Spanish, and I kill English. So if sometimes you hear me talking and you think that you didn't understand something, don't worry about it. It's probably true. So you have to ask me, and I will slow down because I speak fast. And sometimes because I speak fast, people don't understand what I'm saying. So I'm glad to be here and see how I can be of help.
Terrific. Terrific. Thank you so much. So one thing that comes to me as I'm listening to you all talk about your diverse experiences is that as an advisory committee, we really wanted voices that are diverse, have diverse experiences from different regions of the state. And it sounds like we've really accomplished that. So it just validates that, we wanted diverse voices, and it sounds like we're going to get them. So I'm really glad you guys are here. You will find David Fye to be an excellent resource. If you need anything, you're always welcome to reach out to me as well. And I just can't tell you thank you enough for your willingness to serve. Thank you so much. David, do you have anything you want to add at this point?
Well, I just want to welcome you all as well. I've communicated with each of you over email, but it's nice to actually put a face with a name. And as Laura said, we're really happy that you have volunteered your time to serve on this advisory committee. And I think you will find the work of the advisory committee to be really interesting and hopefully really fulfilling. It's interesting to hear the different perspectives and the thoughts, and there are topics that are going to come before you that you receive some information from me in terms of the responsibility of advisory committee members, and that the board can delegate certain issues to the advisory committees to discuss and provide feedback on. And there's also some items that the advisory committees can have a discussion on themselves and then submit recommendations to the board. So this is really a good opportunity to talk about issues that are really timely in the area of counseling right now, and items for the board to discuss and consider. One thing that you'll be asked to look at over the next year are different things that might involve the statutes that outline the profession or that fall under the BSRB. Additionally, there's regulations, and for some of you that haven't had a lot of experience with the two different between the statutes and regulations, the statutes are really the product of what comes out of bills passed before the legislature, and that's the framework for a lot of state government. Those go through bills, and then when they're enacted, they become statutes. The regulations is the agency's ability to sort of flesh out and provide more detail to their responsibilities in certain areas. And so the regulatory changes that we have a lot more ability to enact control and to put things in to really help clarify things for practitioners. And also, our number one goal as a public agency is to protect the public. And so if there's items that you think would be really relevant and helpful in terms of protecting the public that fall under this committee, those would be good things to think about, and then either contact myself or contact Laura, and probably should loop us both in on those. But those would be good things to think about and discuss for the next year. And I don't want to jump too far ahead because there's an item on the agenda to talk about things for the next year. But yeah, I'm happy to talk to each of you as you become more familiar with the items and your responsibility as advisory committee members. The website for the BSRB is a great resource. For the last year and even beyond that, we've posted minutes from meetings and agendas from the past meetings. There's some materials for what the advisory committees have talked about in the past and have worked on. And so those are good things to look at too, because some of those things were resolved and might need to be updated. Other things we were able to work on to a certain point and we'll have to pick up and keep working on. But yeah, reach out to me anytime. I'm happy to clarify any items or talk to you about any different topics, and really excited to have you all on the advisory committee.
David, are there any people on our dial-in?
I did hear a beep. Is there someone on the conference call? Okay, if you're on the conference call, if you could identify yourself, go ahead. Yeah, I did hear it beep, so I'm not sure, but if someone indicates themselves or they speak up, I'll go ahead and let you know.
Okay, well, I'd like to take the opportunity to introduce also Robert Kircher and Leslie Suister. They are current community or counseling advisory committee members, and Leslie is also our board president. So she brings many levels of education, experience, and observation to the committee. And Bob Kircher, Bob, how long have you been on this advisory committee?
I think I've been on it 4 years already at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's been 4 years.
Bob is also very reasonable and vocal and thoughtful and a critical thinker. And so I think you'll find that Leslie and Bob are very, they're assets on this committee. So thank you for serving. And I just, if there's anything you want to say at this point, I certainly don't intend to put you on the spot, but you're welcome to.
Yeah, I've been a counselor educator for, this is my seventh year. I was in Emporia State as a counselor educator for 5 of those years, and now I'm at St. Mary, University of St. Mary. They have an Overland Park branch, and that's where I'm located at. I coordinate I'm the program director for the school counseling program, but I also coordinate the practicum for counseling psychology in the psychology program. So I keep busy doing that. And prior to that, I was a school counselor for over 30 years. So I've been in the profession for a long time.
Perfect. Thank you. Leslie, do you want to say anything? You can say
I was hoping you'd skip me. I love sharing, but yeah, I guess I don't even know, Leslie Allen, how long have I been on the board? Has it been almost 4 years, I think?
Yes.
Leslie knows everything, I always ask Leslie, not this Leslie, but anyway, so yeah, I've been on the board for about 4 years. I was honored to be chosen as the board chair, and I'm trying to do my very best. It's big shoes to fill, but this has been an easier year, I guess. That's crazy to say, but we got everything accomplished last year, and so it's been easy on me. So I felt kind of bad about I'm just kind of sliding into what's already been created for me, which was very nice of the board to do that. So I welcome all of you. I appreciate your time, and I'm big on that. I know that we're all professionals, and we work really hard to respect your time and make sure that you're very valued on these committees, and the board appreciates you, absolutely appreciates you, because we get all of our information from these committees, and that helps drive our decisions with the board. So I do want to say I appreciate you all. I won't share a lot about myself. I'm a private practitioner in Johnson County. I've been doing this for about 15 years. So I work mostly with the courts and DUI and drug offenders here in Johnson County. So been blessed to do that for as long as I have. So anyway, but thank you guys, and thanks Laura for including me.
Absolutely, of course. So I will do the right thing and volunteer some information about myself, because I could easily just skip over myself, but I'm not going to do that since you guys all had to do it. So I have been in private practice for 24 years. I live in Roland Park. I'm married. I have 3 teenagers of my own, an exchange student from, of all places, Wuhan, China, and one from Spain. And so we're a little busy around here. I love it that way. I've taught adjunct at UMKC. My experience with counselor education programs was getting my master's 25 years ago. So I really value all the experience that you have with counseling programs, and again, the diverse nature of all the things that you've done. I've kind of been a one-trick pony for the last 25 years. I took the role of joining the board last year because I wanted a challenge, and I have said many times, I got it. I love learning what is required to keep the high quality of educators, counselors, programs in the state of Kansas. And I'm looking forward to helping to move that forward with all of your expertise. And that's what I have to say. And I want to say David and Leslie are a gold mine over there in that conference room. Leslie has the entirety of the BSRB in her head. I do not know how she does it, especially because they serve social workers, counselors, marriage and family. You have to know all of it. I don't know how you do it. I am in awe every time I work with them. I just can't believe what they know how to do. So we're in good hands. That's all I have to say about that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Laura, if you don't mind, I'll just take a second. I was bad earlier. I didn't really share very much about my background, but I am excited to have you all on the advisory committee. For some of you, this is coming up on the end of my first year with the BSRB. I had previously worked for the legislature for the last 8 years prior to coming over. But with my time at the legislature, I worked in the legislative research department as a principal fiscal analyst, primarily staffing committees and assisting with a lot of budget work. But my primary area of focus over there was on health-related agencies, specifically agencies that were related to the mental health field, like the Department for Aging and Disability Services, and there's 2 state hospitals that are mental health hospitals. And that's how I became connected to the BSRB and got to know Max Foster, the previous director. And over the years, sort of became an asset to the KLRD office in terms of staffing mental health committees. And we organized a mental health bus tour for members of the House and Senate and took them around to see different facilities over about a 3-year span. There was a committee that met last interim that is actually meeting again this interim on mental health modernization and reform. So I was the lead staff member of that, but just throughout the years, really saw the different complexities in the mental health field as it was affected, in Kansas, and really came to appreciate the different work that individuals do in that field. And so when Max announced that he was retiring, I thought it would be a good opportunity to come over and continue to help out. And it's been a big challenge. It's a very busy agency. As Laura mentioned, there are 7 unique professions overseen by the BSRB that we do the licensing and regulation for. So there's a lot of work that the staff works on in terms of licenses and renewals and other things like that. But there's also a side of the office that receives complaints against practitioners and works on any disciplinary issues. And we have an investigator who's a lead investigator, and then another one who splits their time between both. But it's a lot of work, and the staff works really hard here at the office. And so it's been a great resource to me to have such great staff members. And Leslie has been a big help to me. I'll go ahead and defer to her, and she can talk to you a little bit more about her experience here at the BSRB. But just to kind of steal a little bit, she has been with the agency for over 20 years. And so she's seen quite a few changes in the agency and has seen a lot of the legislation and a lot of the statutory changes. And but yeah, she's been a great help to me, and she's wonderful. And she'll be a good resource to you too when you have additional questions. So I'll go ahead and defer to Leslie.
So I grew up in California. I grew up just outside of Los Angeles. I moved here in 1999 and I got a job here. And I've worked in many different positions in the board office, and really that's about it. I moved here because I was a single mother. My son was going to start school and there was really no place I wanted to raise him in California. So I came here with my half sister and we stayed and we love it.
Thank you. Thank you, David and Leslie, so much. Okay, so what are we doing next? COMA, you want to talk about COMA?
Sure. So members of the advisory committee, especially those of you that are new, just wanted to give a little reminder or let you know. Right now, we are doing remote meetings. Under normal circumstances, we are in the board's conference room, and we would love to have you all here in person to sit with each other and discuss some of these issues. But because of the pandemic, we have been asked by the governor's office to avoid in-person meetings. And so there's some other guidance too, in terms of, social distancing and different things like that. And so it's right now with those things that are going on in Kansas and, on a global scale, we're really not able to have in-person meetings with advisory committees and board members for board meetings. But we still want to be able to facilitate the work of the board and the advisory committees. And so temporarily, we've moved all the meetings to online. And so you're appearing by Zoom, and we're broadcasting those meetings on the BSRB YouTube channel. And we do have the conference call line that's open. And so it can seem a little strange because it kind of doesn't feel quite like we would all be in the same room. But there are certain rules that we do need to follow. And so there's usually formal training. Last year, there was our legal counsel, who is, so for the board, we receive legal assistance through the Attorney General's office. There are assistant attorney generals that share time between working with different agencies. And so there's two individuals right now that we receive services from primarily. That's Lainey Bernard and Jane Weiler, and they do a great job helping us out. And in the spring last year, our previous assistant attorney general did a training, and she appeared at each of the advisory committee meetings and talked a little bit more about issues that could come up related to your role as advisory committee members, and talked a little bit more about the Kansas Open Meeting Act, or KOMA. And the Kansas Open Meeting Act is something that we do fall under for these meetings. And I'm not going to get into too many of the details, but I think it's helpful for you to just know a few things. One, our way of providing public access to the meeting is by broadcasting it on YouTube or leaving a conference call for individuals to call in and listen. Individuals can provide they can request public comment. So that's the process by doing that. And that's sort of why we have the script ahead of time, is to lay out some of those different things for individuals from the public. The board's website is a good resource for that too. One thing that may not be intuitive in terms of the Kansas Open Meeting Act is that all meetings, all activity, board or advisory committee business should be done primarily in advisory committee meetings. Now we can work on things outside of the meetings, but you just need to make sure that we don't do something that would involve the majority of members of the advisory committee outside of a meeting. And so it's looking at, is this something that could be considered an advisory committee meeting? And thus you would have a majority of the members that were doing something related to the advisory committee outside of a meeting. So you want to avoid things like that. So we couldn't have just an informal meeting unless it was open to the public and we provided notice, things like that. But that also goes into communications too. So as staff at the BSRB, we have some different guidelines that we follow. And so we're able to provide assistance to all the advisory committee members and to communicate with you, and you have no problem communicating with us. So you can send us emails or call us, and that's perfectly fine. You just want to avoid anything that could appear like a discussion between other members where it might involve the majority of members of the advisory committee. So that's why when I send you messages sometimes over email with materials for the meeting, I say, if you have any questions, respond back to me directly, so that there's not inadvertently a discussion of back and forth communication with advisory committee members outside of meetings, things like that. But we can provide some more documents to you. We'll talk to the board in January to see what method they would like to do in terms of giving you a little more formal training for the KOMA and also the Kansas Administrative Procedures Act, which some of the work of the board does fall under the CAFA as well. But I just kind of wanted to talk to you about a couple of those items first. Under normal circumstances, like I said, we would have individuals here in the boardroom, and we do have seating for individuals who could come in and sit and observe. And so we're trying to replicate that process as best as possible using an online forum. But if you ever have any questions about what might constitute a possible issue of KOMA, feel free to reach out and let us know. It's just probably better just to talk about it ahead of time, just to make sure that it's not an issue. Also, sort of on that point too, should you get questions from members of the public, it's always a good idea to go ahead and loop me in here at the board office. That way we're able to assist you for one thing. And two, should someone request records, there's few things that are confidential, certain pertinent information like social security numbers, that kind of thing, that's confidential. But when it comes to a lot of the other information, that information could be requested by individuals from the public under a certain process. And so I want to make you aware of that. And so you want to make sure that the communications related to certain things are connected to the BSRB by emails, such as by being on the BSRB server, that kind of thing. And our legal staff does a really good job explaining these things, but I just wanted to touch upon them just so you have a little bit more information as you're starting your work on the advisory committee. But these are not meant to limit your questions. It's just there's certain formal processes we have to follow, and we're doing our best to go ahead and follow those. And so I wanted to have a quick conversation with you ahead of time about those things that we fall under, and the board falls under those too. And so if you have any questions on those items or anything else about sort of the rules of the committee or the technical processes, just let me know. You did receive some information ahead of time that outlined the advisory committee policy and talked about the board's mission. So if you reviewed those and returned a sheet to me that says, that you reviewed those materials and you intend to go ahead and abide by, the board's mission and different things like that. But yeah, if you have any questions at any time, just go ahead and feel free to reach out and let us know.
Thank you, David. Okay, our next item is minutes approval for the last two meetings. Does anybody have any questions, feedback about the meeting notes? So we need a motion for each of these individually. Is that correct, David?
That's probably the best way to do it, to kind of separate them.
Okay. Does anyone want to make a motion first for the August 2nd meeting notes? An agenda.
So moved.
Okay.
Leslie C. Wester.
And seconded, Bob Kircher.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
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 Okay, I see everybody said aye, so it's approved. The August 2nd board I can never say it, advisory committee notes. Okay, now we need the October 4th advisory committee notes. I need a motion for that.
I might suggest, just for record, we make sure it's advisory committee meeting minutes.
Thank you.
So yeah, nothing to be negative toward you, Laura, whatsoever.
No, not at
But I
all.
thought, just to clarify, we probably should say that.
Thank
Anyway,
you for
I
that.
wasn't at this meeting, so I can't make the motion.
Okay,
I would so move that we accept the board minutes, proposed minutes as written.
okay, I need a second for that. Can I second that?
I believe you can second that.
Okay, I will second it. So all those in favor of adopting the minutes, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, I saw everyone say aye. Okay, so the minutes have been approved. Thank you for that. Okay, our next item, Executive Director's Report.
Okay. So it's been busy here at the office. I thought I would go ahead and provide some updates on different things that the board has been working on recently, and just some items in general. So first, as I mentioned earlier, we are under the governor's direction to primarily have staff work from home or do remote work when it's feasible. We've also been asked to maintain operations here at the office. So to balance both of those factors, what we've done is we do have technology which allows most staff members to work from home the majority of the week. A lot of staff members are only in the office 1 or 2 days per week. Some of us are in the office a little more, depending upon the responsibilities and the type of work people are doing. We have been asked to go ahead and continue this. It was initially through the beginning of October, and that was extended through the end of October, and recently it has been extended to the beginning of January 2nd, or that first business day would be January 4th. And so that is what we are operating under currently. We will continue to monitor the situation, and it is possible that could be extended further, but that is currently what we're operating under right now, is the governor's direction to do primarily remote work until about January 4th. but the office is open, so individuals do come in to drop stuff off from time to time, although most of the communication is being done over email. One recent item that I'm really excited about is we have changed the way that the BSRB accepts payments for credit cards. And also we have enabled the ability to make payments by electronic checks. And so we have worked with the Information Network of Kansas as a state agency that helps out other agencies with their payments. And so we have gone back and forth and designed a portal, which is now linked on the BSRB website. You can go under, there's a few different ways to get to it from our website, but it says make a payment, or you can go under the services dropdown. And we're really excited about it because we have been looking at the process of licensure. And if there's any ways that we can cut down on the amount of time that it takes, because it can be somewhat complicated to go through the different steps when someone is seeking licensure. And one of the things that was taking a few days was receiving credit card payments. We still depend heavily on the mailer, we did. So shifting this to an online portal should speed up the time that individuals should be able to be verified for their license and submit payments. So we're really excited about that, even though it's just maybe condensing things by a few days, that's going to really be helpful. And it's one step in a larger process of trying to move that initial licensure process to more of a primarily online format. So we're excited about this. It's going to be a more secure method for the individuals who are sending payments as well. And so that became operational earlier. I guess it was in November that we really launched it, and we've been continuing to work with Inc. as we've been making some adjustments and trying to help with the readability of the payment portal and make things a little bit more intuitive for people submitting payments. But we are really excited about that. It has taken quite a bit of work from staff, and so I wanted to thank them for all their hard work. We did have to modify all of the applications for different types of licensure on the BSRB website, and then get those reposted. And we provided some new instructions for making payments. And so it did take a lot of work up front, but we're hopeful that that upfront time will really be beneficial going forward, and it'll make things a lot cleaner. So we're really excited about that new launch of the payment portal. Another item is staffing updates. So we have brought in a temporary employee to assist us for about a month with some light clerical work, and that's been going really well. We have also been in the process of interviewing individuals to fill an open administrative assistant position, and I believe we are close. We have waiting on the governor's office for approval for a candidate, but I think we're really excited, and we think that we are very close. So we'll provide an update for you once that has been finalized, but really excited to be moving forward on that as well. The board did have an annual planning meeting on September 27th and also on October 25th. Once a year, the board does tend to have an offsite meeting, generally in person, where the board focuses on big topics that have come up throughout the year that need some additional explanation and discussion. And the board, because of the pandemic, moved that from an in-person meeting to an online meeting, and split it between 2 days, the September 27th and also the October 25th date. One of the items that was discussed at that meeting had to do with a conversation the advisory committees have had earlier this year on whether there should be changes to the requirements for continuing education in the area of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And this was a topic that was initially brought to the Licensed Psychology Advisory Committee, and also the Social Work Advisory Committee received a similar question from the public. The Licensed Psychology actually had a specific group that made a proposal and came and spoke to them and requested there be a change. But the other advisory committees were asked to weigh in on it for their professions to see should there be a change to the requirements. For levels of licensure, there are 3 hours of ethics. And then at a certain level where individuals are able to diagnose, there is a 6-hour requirement for diagnosis and treatment. And then for social work, there's a small safety requirement, a one-time safety requirement. But most of the licenses have the 3 hours of ethic requirement, 6 hours of diagnosis and treatment requirement. The proposal that had been brought before the Licensed Psychology Advisory Committee was potentially to require 3 hours in the area of diversity, equity, and inclusion once every 2-year licensure cycle. And so the advisory committees discussed that topic. They brought back any kind of recommendations or discussions to that planning meetings of the board. Individuals had a lot of comments about many different topics related to that. The licensed psychology advisory committee recommendation to go ahead and move forward was brought to the board at that meeting to go ahead and require 3 hours in diversity, equity, and inclusion, but to allow for an overlap if the 3 hours could overlap in terms of the topic with the 3-hour ethics requirement, or if they could overlap with the 6 hours of diagnosis and treatment. So you could satisfy both of those requirements with the diversity, equity, inclusion requirement if you found something that met the categories of both. And so they brought that to the board and asked it to go forward. And so that was the position, is to move forward for that licensure group, licensed psychologist. But the other advisory committees did not recommend moving forward with the change to the continuing education requirements in terms of that right now for their areas. There was another topic that had been discussed at length by many of the different advisory committees this year, and that was issues related to when records of deceased practitioners, and where you have records for a practitioner and the practitioner passes away unexpectedly, or you should discover records for someone where the records have been abandoned, how to handle those types of situations. And so there is specific language under the Board of Healing Arts for how they deal with those certain situations. And there is actually a specific fund that has been set up to assist them in naming custodians. This is not an issue that the BSRB faces frequently, but maybe a couple times a year we run into situations like that. And so the issue was, what can the BSRB do from a public safety perspective to assist with those types of situations? There was favor for most of the advisory committees to go ahead and look at regulatory language changes to identify that this would be a requirement of practitioners to identify who could be the custodian of their records should they unexpectedly pass away. And then potentially, if that regulatory change went into place, requiring individuals for licensure to basically would add a question on the forms when someone applies or does a renewal to identify who that person would be. And then we were hoping to work with the Attorney General's office because right now, what happens is if someone abandons the records or if someone passes away unexpectedly, the Attorney General's office can take the records in certain situations. And so we were hoping to provide assistance to that office who could go about naming the custodian for the records. However, in really working through all the questions and all the details of those types of situations, it was discovered that the Attorney General's Office of Consumer Protection, they really don't seize records very often. And they really just seize them in situations where it might be a danger for someone else to receive those records. But they really don't go through the process of naming custodians for records very frequently. And they don't seize the records maybe as frequently as we thought they would seize them or hold custodianship. And so there were also questions about if the BSRB collects this information, who has access to the information or how to go about sharing this information. And we looked at other states to see, do you have similar things in law, mandating that practitioners name who would be the custodian in certain situations, or how would the custodianship pass? And most states really don't have something in place for most of the mental health or behavioral health professions. Oregon does have some language, but they have some different language based on 2 of the different professions. But ultimately what it came down to is that our understanding of what the Attorney General's office, the services that they provide were a little different than what we anticipated when we were having these discussions. So I do think, there is something that we can move forward on to provide help and assistance in this area. But I think this is something we'll probably have to take some more time to really work on and figure out exactly how we can go about doing this in a beneficial way before we go ahead and add requirements for practitioners, because we anticipate they're going to have a lot of questions and we want to be able to answer these questions and have things in a good process. So this will be something that'll be carried over until the following year that we'll just continue to work on for that topic. Another item that was worked on at the recent offsite planning meeting were some significant changes to the board governance policy. There is a document that has been in existence for quite some time that really outlined some guidance or restrictions for board members in certain areas, and it outlined the process for some of the BSRB staff requirements. And then there was some language about advisory committees, because the advisory committees are not, the details of the advisory committees are really not fleshed out in statute or regulation. But the problem with this board governance policy is that it was last updated about 10 years ago. And since that time, certain things have changed in terms of BSRB processes, and some language needed to be updated. And there were also things that needed to be reviewed for the board to either confirm they wanted to continue certain things or to do something different. And so there was a lot of cleanup that needed to be done for that document, and also to identify the authority that that document holds compared to things like statutes and regulations. So the board had a lengthy discussion and asked me to review it and submit some potential changes. So I provided a report to the board. The board discussed those potential changes and made some decisions on different adjustments and things to move forward on. So we will have a draft of the new information for the board to review as it relates to the board governance policy at the January 10th meeting. So there were some significant changes, and some of the changes also affected the advisory committees. And so we went ahead and we're going to be putting that together sort of in a separate document that deals just with the advisory committees, and kind of break that out from the board governance policy a little bit. Another item was, so as a requirement for licensure, the board must see that the individual has met certain qualifications like education and certain experience in certain cases. But also the board must verify that an individual, what we currently phrase it as, is that the individual merits the public trust. And that is one of the requirements for licensure. And we, in certain cases, collect materials provided by the individual to show that the individual has merited the public trust, or to verify that they have not failed to merit the public trust. But the board has had discussions about if this is the appropriate standard to use. Might there be another standard, such as looking at moral character separately, or perhaps in the area of ethics? And so the board had a discussion upon that at its recent meeting as well. Legal representation from the Attorney General's office weighed in on the merit the public trust standard. And it was our legal counsel informed us that the merit the public trust standard is the prevailing standard across the nation in terms of regulatory boards. And so there are some adjustments that the board requested in terms of some language changes. And the board also indicated that it might be helpful to have sort of a frequently asked questions type document for individuals when they submit materials for their licensure. That might speed up the time frame where we wouldn't have to go back and request some of those documents. So we are working on that, and we should have something for the board to take a look at when the board comes back for the January meeting. Additionally, the board made some adjustments to the website posting policy. There had been some questions about what disciplinary items and other items should be posted to the board's website. So we had legal counsel from the Attorney General's office also weigh in on our language in the document posted to our website. And they recommended some changes, which the board went ahead and adopted in terms of clarifying a little bit better what items would be posted. There weren't any substantive changes differing from what the policy was previously, but the language I think is clarifying and making it a little bit more helpful about what should get posted to the board's website and what is being posted to the board's website. So that was adopted by the board, and we have modified the document and posted it to the website. And then one other item I wanted to bring to your attention is, there was an individual group who wanted to come and provide public comments at an advisory committee meeting over the last few months. And public comment is rare for our meetings. In general, for our board meetings and advisory committee meetings, that in the past, there has not been a number of individuals who have attended these meetings to provide public comment for the board. It does happen, maybe a handful of times a year, where individuals request to attend meetings, to talk to one of the advisory committees or the board, but it's not a frequent occurrence. And as I mentioned, the board deals with licensure items. It also deals with disciplinary items. And sometimes it can be a little confusing from the public on what the correct forum is to go ahead and bring information to the board. And so when as I mentioned, my past experience was working for the legislature, and for each of the legislative committees, they adopt rules for the committee, and then they adopt something that's more guidance for public attendees at meetings to outline what the expectation is for people from the public attending the meetings, and some other items that may be helpful for them. And in the past, we've had so infrequent public attendees that we don't have a document such as this in place. But I think there's a value in us having something like that, so we can invite more public comment from individuals, but also to share with them, what might be the best place to provide information for the board, whether that's by email or submitting a complaint, or by maybe coming to a board meeting, or there's different ways of talking to the board or providing information. So we are in the process of drafting a document that we can provide to the board at the January meeting, so they can review and take into consideration if we should go ahead and use a document like that for board meetings and for advisory committees as well. One item that will be coming up is the 2022 legislative session. For those of you that aren't familiar with the legislative process, every year the legislature in Kansas meets in the spring, usually about the second week in January. And from that date until sometime in May or sometime in June at times, the committees meet and hold hearings on bills. Every year they approve all state agency budgets. We have the opportunity, if we would like to have statutory changes, that we can request bills from the legislature, and then we can present information about why we would like certain things changed in law. Last year, the BSRB board made certain recommendations, and we requested these be drafted into bill form for consideration by the legislature. And most of the items that the board had requested and recommended were enacted by the legislature in House Bill 2208. And so there are some items that the board has made recommendations on this year, and we have started the process. The process goes something like this. You have the Office of the Reviser of Statutes, which officially drafts bill legislation. They get the specific language in bill form. But to work with the Office of the Reviser of Statutes, you need permission by a member of the legislature. And so we have gone about requesting permission from a member of the legislature, and they have confirmed our request. So we've reached out to the Office of the Reviser of Statutes, and we've submitted some dates that they could potentially meet with us, and we could talk to them about possible bill draft language. So we are waiting to hear back from the Office of the Reviser of Statutes, but then we will meet with them, and then we will put the recommendations into bill form. And then once the legislature begins meeting in January, we can appear before the most likely the health committees and request introduction of our draft bill. And then at that point, we wait for the chairs to schedule those hearings, and then we will keep you informed when our bill comes up, if it is scheduled for hearing this year. So that's the general process. Last year was a little unique because of concerns about the pandemic. We were advised to go ahead and submit it in both chambers, so we did. We submitted one for the House Health and one for the Senate Health. So we'll have some additional conversations and try to find out if that's the best method this year, or if we should just go ahead and submit it in one chamber. But that's the process that'll be happening here very quickly in the spring when the legislative session begins. And then we'll go through, and I'll be going over to the legislature talking about the budget for the BSRB, and then following our bill as it works its way through the process. So in terms of my report, there's one other item I wanted to talk to you about. There is a committee that is meeting right now, and that is a special committee on mental health modernization and reform. I mentioned that a little earlier. They met last year and made some recommendations, and they're meeting again this year. Leslie Allen and I have attended a couple of their meetings upon request that have dealt with telehealth topics. And so we know there'll be some recommendations. The way this committee works is a committee of members of the House and members of the Senate. And they have established working groups to assist the work of the committee. And these working groups are made up primarily of subject matter experts in the area of health or behavioral health or mental health. And so those working groups are meeting, and they are submitting draft language for potential recommendations. and then the committee will discuss those and consider adopting them. And so I'll be tracking those meetings. The next full meeting of that committee is going to be on December 10th. And so when they finalize recommendations, which they may at that meeting, or they may do it a little bit later in December, but I'll be bringing those back for the board to review, and so they can be aware of the different recommendations that committee is working on. But they have done a lot of work this fall, and so I think there will be things that are going to be relevant to the BSRB. And so with that, I'll go ahead and conclude my report, but I'd be happy to answer any questions that any of you may have on any of those topics.
Great, thank you so much. Does anybody have any questions for David at this point? Okay, well, if you do, don't be afraid to reach out to him. Every time I say that, I think about all the work I'm putting on him, but I know that's why he's there. And you thought you were done talking. What about old business? David, what do you got?
Sure. So I had listed the board's annual planning meeting, but I kind of rolled that into the executive director's report. So that is something that's once a year that will take place again next year in the fall, usually around September. But I went ahead and summarized those topics. So I don't think there's anything more to update in terms of the annual planning meeting, but I think those meetings were very beneficial. So
great. And then did you want to say anything else about the syncing of the licenses?
Sure. So this was something that had been requested for discussion purposes. Earlier this year, the advisory committee talked about this. So for some of you that are new to the advisory committee, the BSRB oversees over 14,000 individual permanent licenses from individuals that practice under the 7 professions of the BSRB. There are about 1,000 people who have more than one license under the BSRB. And so there had been a question about, or a request really for certain individuals who said, I have multiple licenses under the BSRB, but my expiration date for one of them is in a certain month, and the expiration date for another one is in a different month. And they would like to sync up those expiration dates so that they don't forget about an expiration date, and they can just take care of them both at the same time. Advisory committees were asked to discuss this, and at the last advisory committee meeting for professional counseling, it was noted that it might be helpful to have a survey to hear from individuals on their thoughts. But the board had talked about this topic and really asked for the advisory committees to kind of speak for the professions, to weigh in instead of a survey. So we wanted to bring this back to you to just see if you had any additional thoughts on whether you think individuals would be in favor of a change like this. In terms of the mechanics, this would need to be something that would be done in statute. So it would have to go into a bill, and it would need to be passed by the legislature. And one of the reasons is that in statute, it identifies how long the terms of licensure are. And for most of these, it's 2 years. And so we're not able to go ahead and change that time frame because it's outlined in statute of a certain length. Because essentially to sync them up, what you would need to do is you would need to forfeit a certain amount of time for one of your licenses so that it would be at the same time. We wouldn't be able to extend it and provide more months. But it would be something that would need to be changed in statute. And part of this too is that, this may be part of a larger conversation about giving individuals the ability to change the length of licensure. We've talked a little bit about this past year. We have individuals sometimes who indicate that they want to stop practicing. And they ask, can you go ahead and just make my license inactive? We really don't have a way to make a license inactive. And so we really don't have a good process by which to go ahead and end the license. Now, if we're notified that someone has passed away, that's kind of a different subject. But when we have an individual who, indicates they no longer want to practice, in certain situations, they surrender their license to the BSRB, but under most circumstances, what we would tell them is, well, your license is going to expire at a certain time. And so you just won't need to worry about renewing your license when your licensure period is up. But as I mentioned, it's kind of a larger conversation topic to see, is this something that we could, potentially change in statute to solve multiple issues, to let people change their length of licensure by making it, less. It seems like a strange topic without the context, but it could work for both situations. But in terms of the advisory committee discussion, the first was, would you be in favor, or do you think that licensees, looking as your experience with other individuals in this area, do you think individuals who are licensed, who have more than one license, would be in favor of being able to sync up the expiration date of their license? And so that's kind of what the board wanted to have advisory committees discuss and kind of weigh in on. And then the recommendations from the advisory committee on that topic could be reported back to the board.
Terrific. Thank you. And then anything you'd like to share about the Ottawa program review?
Well, and Laura, if you want to have a discussion on the syncing of licenses, I think there was some conversation at the last advisory committee meeting about there was some favor in doing that. But since we have new advisory committee members, I thought it might be helpful if any of the new members had any thoughts on if they thought individuals, licensees might be in favor of syncing the licenses.
You'd like to have that, you wouldn't have that conversation now.
I think if individuals are ready to have that conversation, or if they have any thoughts, could be helpful today to kind of collect that feedback.
Okay. So does anybody, yeah.
I have a question. And usually, my biggest concern usually is the financial bottom line, even for the state or the person. Can we have any sense of what would be the financial bottom line for changing the things as they are now from what they're asking for?
Let me pause 1 second. We got disconnected from our conference call, so I'm going to dial back in so that if anyone wants to call in on the conference call, they can. So.
Welcome to the Conference Nation conferencing service. Please enter your PIN number to join your conference. Please hold while we place you into your conference.
Okay. Sorry about the technical delay, but could you go ahead and restate your question?
Yes, I'm just asking about the financial bottom line in terms of the individual and the state, in terms of that change will amount to some money in terms of the individual and the state, or both, so do we have any sense of how that, because I also agree that it would be kind of nice to send the individual who are interested to see either we for or against, so we have a pool, but I also want to know the bottom line in terms of financial costs.
Sure. Well, I think one, in terms of the financial cost, so if this was something that was recommended by the board, we would go ahead and ask that it be put into draft statutory language to be put into a bill. And that process really doesn't have a direct cost on us. Now, if it was enacted, if there was any regulatory language that would need to be synced up with the new language, then we would need to make changes in the regulations. And then when we submit that, I think there is a cost to publish that, but it's not, it wouldn't be a super, big cost, and it would be a one-time expense. To your point about cost, there was some discussion from the other advisory committees. While some people might want to sync up the expiration date and have them all together so that they were able to remember, them both at the same time, other individuals talked about the cost factor of, do you want to have the cost for both licenses come up at the same time, or would you like to spread that out a little bit so that they're not coming up at the same time? And the same thing about continuing education requirements. Do you want to have those both come up at the same time, or would you prefer to spread those out? The scenarios that most of the advisory committees discussed is that it wouldn't be a mandatory thing, so that it wouldn't be synced up automatically. It would more or less be an option, so that if people wanted to pursue that, they could make a request to do that. But I think the scenarios that individuals talked about, it would still be an optional type syncing up.
David, hasn't that, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Michelle.
Okay, I was just, hasn't that been the practice in the past? Because I have 2 licenses. Mine still are on August and October, but I had a colleague that she synced hers up. Haven't you been kind of informally letting people do that?
So this is coming up on the end of my first year with the board, and so some of this is kind of a cleaning up certain processes and then taking a look at some of our what we have flexibility officially with in statutes and regulations. So I think in some cases it has been done in the past, but in really going through with our legal counsel and looking, do we have specific authority to do certain things? We're taking a closer look and trying to clean up some of our processes. So I think you're right. I think it has been done in the past at times, but going forward, we kind of need to have a more defined authority to do that so that it's a little bit cleaner for everybody.
And I think that also that is making it voluntary is a good idea, because earlier in my career, it would have been a financial kind of difficulty for me to do both at the same time. But, I think once you get a little bit more seasoned and get more, learn how to, I don't mean private practice, those of us that don't have guaranteed income, you learn, when how it ebbs and flows, so you can figure that out. But so I think for a seasoned therapist, it's probably a really nice thing for us to be able to sync those up. Whereas for a young person that's trying to make ends meet, it might be better to let them, manage it in the best way that works for them. So that's just.
As a person who also has 2 licenses, I think it would be a lot easier in terms of dealing with the paperwork involved in gathering your CEUs, to be able to do that at one time every 2 years, and to maintain those kinds of records, to have all of that together and submitted at once.
I would like to kind of go back to the piece where we have one member with experience and their own experience. Would be kind of nice to have, like an informal survey, kind of feeling the people in the field to see, what would be the preference, and that will allow us to make an informed consent, in terms of, how we're going to proceed based on what we feel out there in the field. Because I've never done private practice in my 35 years. I do pro bono. That's about it. But I work in an agency. I work in have a kind of regular income. But it would be kind of nice to know from the field how they go, and that will allow us to make a better decision, I think.
So any other questions or feedback on that?
I guess somebody else brought up the point about syncing the CEUs, and I think that would be it, to have the CEUs, some would count for both licenses. And to have that all submitted at once would be much easier. But again, that's another thing to look into. How would you discern the syncing of the CEUs?
We do that now. It's just for 2 years prior to the license expiration date.
Right.
So
Yeah.
a lot of it matches anyway. I mean, some do not, but we do that now, so it wouldn't be any additional work for staff.
And when you submit for your licensure, you just have to say yes or no if you have those CEUs. So only time you'd actually be putting them together is if you were audited, then
Right.
you'd have to send the further information.
Right. So David, did anyone else request a survey? Request that we conduct a survey to get the data?
I think that was discussed by the board at the beginning, but then it was deferred to the advisory committees. Since the advisory committees, are familiar with the individuals for the different professions.
Right.
So they thought, it'd be helpful for the members of the advisory committees to kind of weigh in on this topic and, to hear from the advisory committees specifically in these areas. So.
Okay.
Seems like that was my doing, Laura, just to be honest, because I didn't want to add more work to David and Leslie. And I think it's important. Advisory committees, I think where the advisory committees are the ones who help the board make the decisions. So you all are representatives of the other licensees in your field. So I think it's important to do that. So.
Yeah. I like a survey just because it's data. It's important data that, if it's not too hard to get, it's nice to have. How many out of the 14,000 BSRB licenses, how many are counselors?
That's a good question. I can pull that real quickly. But yeah, give me just a minute and I can probably pull that information for you.
Well, it can be a ballpark. It doesn't need to be exact, but.
David, can advisory committees do their own surveys of their own licensees?
Yes. Yep. Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, I know the social work has done a survey in the past, and I'm not familiar with other professions having done that, but it wouldn't surprise me. There could have been other ones. So.
You're saying the social work committee has done a survey on this subject?
Not on this subject, but on things like supervision. I think there was one maybe around 2015 or so.
Okay.
I think what I was suggesting, Laura, if you want to do a survey on this subject, the advisory committee can put together that survey and send out to the licensees.
I really like that idea.
I do too, because I think they also include the people who are not part of the boards. They're out there doing the thing. They feel that the people who control the profession are giving them a seat at the table. So I think that feel very inclusive to me.
Yeah, exactly.
I think the only other thing would be the timeliness, because if we're looking at our board meeting in January, it would have to be a quick turnaround, and you're looking at holidays and things like that. So just to kind of, be real about that as well.
Right.
It's difficult because there's new members, and you're wanting to make sure you represent all of the licensees. But I think this is a subject that probably can be continued if we need to, and the board even. So sorry, David, I think I interrupted you.
No, that's okay. I got pulled the numbers for the number of licenses. So professional counselors make up almost 2,000 of the total licenses. So that'd be about 2,000 of the 14,000.
Yeah.
So the largest group is social work, but professional counseling does appear to be the second largest. It's just.
Got it. Thank you for that.
Sure.
So what would the process be if we created a questionnaire, David? Is that something you and I would do together, and then we would send it out and then just collect the data?
Yeah, I'm currently assisting the social work advisory committee on an updated survey for them as well, for their advisory committee. And so, yeah, we can work on finalizing the questions. I think we kind of had the broad context from this meeting, and you and I could continue that conversation, and then we could go ahead and send that out.
So when would we expect our data back? Do you think we would have it back in time for the January board meeting? I honestly would prefer to confer with this committee before we made a final recommendation. So it feels like to me we should, built into this would be asking in January to delay a final decision until we can meet as a committee. Does that sound like a good plan?
I'm not sure I'm following you exactly on that one.
We'll get the data, but by the time we have the data, our committee will not be meeting until February. So I'd really prefer to bring that data back to our committee in February so that we can decide what to recommend. And if we're doing that, then that means we wouldn't have a final answer to present to the board in January. Does that seem like an acceptable change in what we might do in January with the board? To ask
That
for
would mean it couldn't go into the bill this year.
Ooh.
So can I throw something out? Laura, you know me well enough. I'm just going to say what's on my mind.
Thank
So
you.
we are talking about, and the committee may feel differently, and that's fine. I think, speak up if I'm speaking out of turn, but it is a voluntary, we are moving forward that it is voluntary. So in this particular situation, it's not that we're forcing our licensees into a decision. We're giving that as an option. So if I hold 2 licenses, I have the option to have that coincide on the same come due at the same year.
Oh.
So we're not forcing, if that makes it feel any better, I guess, moving forward without a, survey, we're not forcing anyone into a decision. We're saying this is an option if you choose this option. You don't have to do it. So I don't know if that makes you feel better about if it doesn't move forward fast enough. We're just saying, hey, here's another option if you choose it. If not, it stays the same. So, and I will tell you, I like the idea of it staying the same. I like the differences of the two licenses being separate, because that's what I've always been used to. So I don't want to change. But it could be, that another licensee may say, well, no, I don't want that. I want it just to be on, all due at the same time. And that's a choice that they can make, but we're not requiring it.
So you're saying because it will be a choice, there's really not as much urgency because people can really keep it the way they want to keep it.
Yeah, and the point I was trying to make with surveys, maybe in the future, right, if there's something that this committee says, we want to survey our licensees, and that is an option, just to throw that out there. If there's something more pressing that you are feeling like you're kind of pushing a decision and your licensees, you want, notice from your licensees, that's a way to do that. So I wasn't necessarily saying for this topic, I guess.
Okay. Any other questions or feedback about that?
When I heard what Leslie's saying, I don't know why, but even options will come from about me. I like to know that I have an option before I get the options. I don't know if that makes any sense, but I think that Leslie made perfect sense. This is not, but by the same token, my idea of options is to know that I have that option.
Right.
Before I get the option,
And licensees would know that they had the option. We would, from the board perspective, I would assume, right, that we would notify the licensees and make sure there's an understanding of the option. Is that correct, Dave and Leslie?
Yeah. So
yeah, we wouldn't just push it on people.
Yeah. So there would be what we would do is we would put it into bill draft language, and then it would officially go through the hearing process for the legislature. And then if it was enacted, what we did last year is we sent out a letter to all licensees saying, here is what was in the bill that was passed by the legislature. And so it would be included in the topics. And we posted a link to that message on our website this year after that too. So they would get some notice about different changes coming up. And then when they were essentially after that point, after it was enacted and they had the ability to do that, then they could go in and take a look at it more closely.
So it sounds like what we're saying is based on the urgency of time, because in January, this decision is going to be made by the board and because it's a choice, not mandatory for all dual licensees, that we won't do a survey at this point about it, and that we will notify everybody as soon as it has become regulatory language. Do I understand the points?
Yeah, it would need to go into statute, so it would need to go into a bill for the legislature. But yeah, once we put it, if it was something that the board recommended, then it would go into bill draft language and then go through the hearing process. And so, but yeah.
Okay. Any other discussion about this topic? Okay, thank you. Dave, anything you want to add about the Ottawa program review?
Sure. So in the past, when we've done program level reviews, a lot of that work on the program level reviews has been done by sort of advisory committees, and they've been reviewing different things. If they have members who had experience with, some of the educational criteria the board would be looking for in terms of if this program meets the standards. But we are in the process of trying to formalize that process a bit more. And really the approval of the program would be a board decision. And so while we are going to be continuing to work with individuals who have expertise, we're probably going to be moving that away from a lot of the conversation being in advisory committee meetings, so that we as the agency can work with individuals to know what information to provide back to the board for their review. So I just kind of wanted to, earlier this year, there had been some discussion about the Ottawa program. And we're going to continue to work with individuals as that program is being reviewed. But just to kind of know why its conversation would be moving outside of the advisory committees to more of a conversation with the agency. And then we would take that information and share it with the board for the board's ultimate decision about should you approve this program or not. So we just kind of wanted to get back to the advisory committee and let them know about the change in process.
I might also comment that it seemed as I have helped review and taken a look at programs, I think that at one point we were doing them on kind of a spreadsheet or a table format, and that was pretty helpful. There were more things that were included than maybe included at the present time. So if I can find that form, I'll send it up to you to take a look at. It was done for all the programs in Kansas that wanted approval. All programs had to go through that process, and there was a form that was actually used. I don't know whether Todd was the one that created it or whomever, but we did review programs in that way, and it I guess forced more thorough kind of a review in some ways. And I think it's, as we go forward, as whomever goes forward, I think that's an important thing, is to make sure that all the categories of regulations are covered. I'm not sure that, as an example, in the past, they actually took a look at the coursework that was offered and how closely it matched, and the counselor educators were able to check that fairly easily with and when you do a self-study, what you're doing is you're providing the syllabi and everything to be able to do that with, so that you could actually make sure that that was a truly accurate review. And so I would recommend that as that goes forward, that those things also be included in that, regardless of who does it, that those things be included in it as well, to make sure everything is covered.
I have the self-study rubric right here from Todd Fry.
Ah,
Would
Yeah,
you
I
like-
pulled it down and was using it recently.
Would you like me to forward it to you, Leslie?
please. Is that
Okay.
what you're talking about, Bob?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, I looked for it. It was in the Dropbox, so I didn't have access to it.
I'll
Bob-
send it right now.
Okay, but yeah, Bob, wanted to thank you for your help with that. And we've had a couple other members, the advisory committee, have also weighed in and provided some comments. And so, yeah, really appreciate your help with that. And so thank you for that.
Do you need the syllabi or did you get it?
I'm sorry.
Do you have the syllabi?
No,
Oh, okay.
that was one of the things that
I'll find that and get it to you.
in the reviews that are currently taking place,
Right.
that's one of the things that I noticed, was that there are areas that were not being asked for response, and some of them that were being asked weren't very thorough with the responses. I spent the weekend reviewing, so that's kind of fresh on my mind in that respect.
Okay. I'll find the coursework and send that to you.
That would be great. Thank you.
Is this program looking at K-CREP also? I mean, because if so, then that would pretty much cover what is required.
I don't know if they're looking for that yet or not. This is it'll be a brand new program, so I don't know I don't know if they plan on K-Prep or not.
Yeah, I don't know if this program, that was one of the questions that wasn't answered directly. So there were several of those within the questionnaire that they completed, and the information that was provided that was just not straightforward.
Yeah, because K-Prep approval was pretty rigorous.
Right,
Right.
and we accept K-Prep.
Yeah.
So K-CAP also, in order to be K-CAP accredited, you have to have at least 2 years of data before you apply.
Uh-huh.
So if it's a new program, they won't have data.
Right.
It's not a new program. It's been around for quite a while, actually. What they're asking for is approval for. They're asking BSRB approval, however, for training in Kansas.
And residency.
Correct.
That was one of the things they were changing.
I'm done.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next we have new business. And really the only thing we have on there is, planning our committee work for the upcoming year. David, do you want to add or say anything about that?
Well, I think if there's ideas people have today, but really thinking, more towards the beginning of next year, if there's items, it could be nice to dive in first meeting of the year and really think about things that the committee could have discussions on maybe throughout the year. So for those of you that are new to the advisory committee, not a bad idea to go ahead and look through the statutes and regulations for the profession. Those are on the BSRB website. A couple things to that. So the regulations are things that do help fully explain, the agency's responsibilities, and they flesh out certain areas. But it's important for us from time to time to go ahead and review the language and the regulations to see if everything is up to date, or to see if some standards may have changed, or there might be terminology that'd be better. There are certain unique things going on right now. The expansion of telework or teleservices has been a big change over the last couple of years, especially. But making sure that things that used to apply to person-to-person interactions when you're in the same room, if those still read the same way when looking at them and thinking about them in those contexts. As some of the other examples, things like looking at social media, and are there things that should be changed in the language for technology? So anything that you think would be good to look at. I can tell you from conversations I've heard over at the legislature and looking at bills that have come up the last few years, there are certain groups that really take a very strong look at regulatory processes. One group of people would like there to be everything in statute instead of regulation, but it's helpful for us as agencies to be able to do work and regulations. But to be fair to the process, it's important for us to be able to defend what's in regulation and to say that this is not language that has just sat and it's outdated and we never look at it, that we are being responsible custodians of the profession in terms of the licensing and regulation, by making sure that we are reviewing that language and we are making sure that we are keeping things up to date and making sure to account for changes, as I had talked about it before. So one nice thing for the next time we dive into this topic would be to look into those different areas and maybe others. One item that was discussed by the advisory committee earlier this year that might be a good discussion for next year is that there was a multi-state compact for professional counseling that has been discussed, and it's been put together. It's been passed by 2 states, Maryland and Georgia, and the advisory committee had discussions on that language earlier this year. I have not heard any conversation from individuals who have told me that they're going to be proposing that language as a draft bill for the 2022 legislature, but that's something that could happen. Or if not this year, perhaps maybe in future years, that language could come up. So looking at multi-state compacts in general, I think is a wise idea. But that proposed language is also something that I know other states are discussing too. So any kind of hot button issues that would apply to professional counseling or to the BSRB in general, I think any of those would be really good things to be thinking about for planning for next year.
Does anybody have anything they'd like to add to that list right now? Anything that comes to mind? My two passions, which are big umbrellas, are diversity of counselors in the field and just the number of counselors in the state of Kansas. I mean, obviously we have a huge shortage. So those are my two, and I know those are not easily solved, but I think to be mindful of those two topics with any ongoing discussion is crucial. So I'll be bringing those up readily as we go on with all the different topics that we plan to solve. Anybody else have anything now?
Laura, I think that if you look at the compact idea that come from ACA and NBCC, that probably help also to kind of work in terms of the choice of counsel, particularly in rural areas. Because I think that's always a hurdle. Somebody who have license in 5 states, I know how difficult it is in some time for you to jump from one state to the other and having to, kind of manage what's going on, knowing that you already meet the requirements, at least for KCRAP and NBCC, but yet, I still have to jump through hoops. So I think that probably will be something that should be hand in glove and discussing, the choice of counselors versus how easy, how difficult, without sacrificing quality and effectiveness.
Right. Exactly. Thank you. Okay, we'll put it on our list.
I have a little tidbit that's just interesting.
Yes,
So
ma'am.
far, the person with the most licenses that applied here for social work was 25. She was licensed in 25 states.
Wow. Oh my goodness.
I just found that interesting.
Yeah.
No way to be able to keep up with all that.
Wow. She needs
And-
staff for that.
Yeah.
On a related point, there is a social work compact, so that is currently being drafted. But a number of different groups are playing a role in that. They don't think it's going to be ready for this coming session, I don't believe. But I think they're eyeing more towards the 2023 legislative session. And those conversations have been kind of going on at a national level, but don't have a lot of details about that. They had an open meeting to launch the work of the group putting together that social work compact, but the other meetings haven't been public, so we don't have a lot of information about what has come out of that yet, but we are monitoring any work on those multi-state compacts for sure.
Terrific. Terrific.
I have a question. I don't know whether this is even appropriate for, maybe this has to be done federally is what compensation for Medicare for licensed clinical professional counselors, because licensed clinical or master's level clinical social workers, they can get compensated for Medicare. And out here in Hayes, there's not that many people like in private practice. Right. So what we're finding, those of us in private practice, is the counselors, we can't get paid to help the elderly or the people that are on disability.
Right.
And I just don't know whether that's something that we tackle on this level, or is it something that we need to go federally about? I don't know.
It's not something in our statutes or regulations, but maybe the Kansas Counselor Association.
Okay.
Yeah, in terms of payments, though, that is something that they have discussed at some of the meetings that we set in for the legislature. So I know they're looking at payment related issues. Most of those go through, KDADS or KDHE in terms of those type changes. But I know they are discussing certain payment items in terms of the recommendations. So
okay, you mean is it on the state level?
Yeah, on the state level, like the Kansas legislature, they had that legislative committee that was meeting recently, and it's such a broad topic. So they had different working groups related to different areas, but they have had some discussions about issues related to payment. I'm not sure what the official recommendations are going to come out of that committee, but it wouldn't surprise me if some of those recommendations were put into bill form and then put forward during the 2022 legislative session. But we'll just kind of have to watch and keep an eye on those.
Okay, yeah, I'd be glad to, to talk to somebody if I needed to. I got told that this happened a long time ago and that the social workers had better lobbyists, and that's how it got in there. I mean, I don't understand all the ins and outs of it, but I've always been kind of curious about it, and then it started to affect us, and so like there's several of us that like our education is so close to what social workers have to do, and we have to jump through a lot of the same hoops and stuff. We just don't understand why we can't get compensated equally.
Well, ACA do have a lobbyist, and we've been lobbying for a long time. I've been part of the ACA inner circle for the last 10 years, so I do know that we'll be, but I don't think that we'll be, because that go back in terms of the choice again, the Laura was talking about. And why I want to have a master and a license in counseling if I don't going to get compensated versus if I get a master in social work, I know I'm going to be compensated. So I think that's something that at the state level, we need to be talking, even if it's not a preview for us, because that affects us directly, in terms of recruiting, in terms of graduating, in terms of preparing, put people in rural areas, for service. So I think that it's not, at least in my mind, we should not just push that aside because it's not a state issue. It should be a state issue.
Okay.
I think our legislators need to be educated also about the qualifications of LPCs and LCPCs. In addition, they probably need to hear from us in writing letters to them regarding this. As a counselor educator, I had experienced students who were trying to make decisions about whether to go into the field of social work or into the counseling field, and they really preferred to go into counseling, but everything that they had been told is that if they were social workers, they would be able to get compensated, get paid more readily. And so they made the decision to go into social work when really they would have preferred to be in the counseling field. So I think this is a huge issue in many ways.
I agree.
Before I forget, I just wanted to let you know, so there may be bills that will come before the legislature on this topic coming up. Some of these issues, I think maybe why some of these issues are maybe pushed by the associations might be just the difference in our primary purposes between, as a state agency, our primary focus is on protecting the public, whereas associations might have a primary focus on advancing the profession. But then again, you could have where you have goals that connect, such as you want to make sure that you have enough practitioners to provide services, and that you created an incentive to make sure that people are able to receive the services they need. And so, but I think maybe historically that's why some of the associations have introduced that type of legislation. But in terms of bills before the legislature, before I forgot, I just wanted to say, we do have occasionally board members or advisory committee members who submit testimony, or maybe even would want to talk at a legislative hearing. I just wanted to make sure to clarify for you all that you're not restricted as advisory committee members from submitting testimony or talking on any issues. But it's important to know, just to be careful, that if you're speaking just for yourself, to make sure that you're not saying that you're representing the board or the advisory committee because of your connection to it. So that's something to keep in mind if you do offer comments on different legislation. So.
Any feedback on that topic? Okay. So if you have any ideas, any other topics that you'd like to see us add to our work for the next year, contact David, contact me, just CC both of us on that information so that we can make sure to be aware of it and to include it, incorporate it. And as we wind down, I just want to again say thank you so much for our new members and for all the hard work that we plan to do in the future. Thank you so much for joining, being willing to serve.
Nice to meet all of you.
Yeah. And Laura, I think the next meeting would be in February. And since the advisory committee usually meets the first Monday of the month, that would be Monday, February 7th.
February 7th, yeah, 10 a.m. We usually take close to 2 hours, so please plan about that time. I try not to go over.
And just a note, going forward, without knowing, the situation involving the pandemic, all advisory committee meetings are being held remotely. So we'll go ahead and send out a Zoom invitation. When we are able to start having meetings in person again, we'll continue to broadcast meetings for public access. We'll be sending out a Zoom invitation for that February 7th meeting. So it should be sent out as a calendar appointment for you. So.
Terrific. Thank you, David. So I need now a motion and a second for adjournment. Do I have an emotion? Anybody?
I move.
Okay, deal. Thank you.
I second.
Go ahead, Michelle. That's good.
Michelle and Jessica second that, and I need all those in favor to say aye.
Aye.
Bye.
Aye.
Thank you so much. Have a lovely holiday season. See you soon. Thank you again.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.